All right, so first I want to thank David Berman and Giselle, as usual, for helping make this possible. And I want to tell people, if you have a chance, this afternoon, I listened to Fresh Air. Terry Gross wasn't doing the interview, but the interview was with Deborah Feldman, the author of Unorthodox, and it was an exceptional interview. I recommend it to everyone. I mean, she's an amazing woman, and the Netflix is not, it's fictional. It's not all biographical. So I think it's worth hearing her story and also her reflections. One other announcement, and that is that after I'm going to do a drop of teaching as we begin now. But then I'm going to switch to my phone, so it needs a little bit of patience because I'm going to walk around as we do this tour. It literally is a tour. So I'm going to share a source now, and we'll do some studying. If I can find it here it is. Okay, I apologize for the fact that the page is not straight, so excuse me. But we're doing an art tour, and I don't want art to be merely objectified, although obviously that's what we're seeing, material culture. But I want you to understand the spiritual dimension of Judaica. And my experience, by the way, with Judaica artists, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about, that basically the way we got to collect is we also got to know the people who made the art, is that it's not merely, a production, or not only their artistic representation. There's something of their soul that's invested. And most probably that's true of all artists, that there's a spirit in the paintings, the classical paintings, and that we need to appreciate that. There's an inner dimension, and it's what we see and how it also strikes us. So the source in Jewish tradition is a verse that's familiar to many of you. It's from the Song of the Sea, from Az Yashir, and in Hebrew, Ze Eli V'Anvehu, this is my God, and I will adore him. Or here the translation, this is my God and I will glorify him. Anvehu. From the Hebrew, noi, to which is art, linavot would be, in this case, to beautify. The sages interpreted Anvehu homiletically as linguistically related to noi, beauty, and interpreted the verse, beautify yourself before God in mitzvot. Right? You have these commandments. So clearly, already here you see that the rabbis feel that mere performance is insufficient, that you have to enhance the performance. And there are different strategies for enhancing the performance. There's a meditative strategy, there's a symbolic understanding, a moral understanding, and there's an artistic expression. In the performance of the art, there's something of the ritual. The art enhances the performance itself. And so the rabbis teach, even if one fulfills the mitzvah by performing it simply, meaning just doing the act, it is nonetheless proper to perform the mitzvah as beautifully as possible. Make before God a beautiful sukkah, a beautiful lulav, a beautiful shofar, beautiful ritual fringes. Let me finish. Beautiful parchment for a Torah scroll, and write it in God's name, the beautiful ink, with a beautiful quill by an expert scribe, and wrap the scroll in beautiful silk fabric. Now, I want to focus on this simply because it struck me that it doesn't mean that you have to spend a lot of money to beautify the act. And I think there's a lot of, maybe an overemphasis on that hiddor mitzvah, beautifying the mitzvah, is a function of how much how much it costs. Obviously, there's a simple way to make things beautiful. So the plain meaning of the text is that God's glory is present in the act of redeeming Israel as they cross the sea. The rabbis use this notion of glory to mean that it's not that we can glorify God. God can be made manifest through beauty, the beauty of nature and the beauty that we create in choosing and crafting beautiful, rich ritual objects. Beautifies the ritual, enhances the ritual. Right? It brings, somehow there's a sense that by our contributing our creativity to the actual act itself, God's presence can be felt in the performance in the performance of the mitzvah. Now, there's a second interpretation here, which leads us in a different direction, but which nevertheless I think is relevant, and it's very profound. Abba Shaul says, "Ve'anvehu," he has a different reading. Instead of glorification, his homily is, "Anvehu" should be interpreted as if it were written in two words, "Ani vahu," God and me, or me and God. We're partners, me and him. Be similar, as it were, to God. Just as God is compassionate and merciful, so too should you be compassionate and merciful. So God relies on us to manifest godliness in the world. So by beautifying the commandments, so we become partners with God in creating further beauty in the world. God, and part of the reason that that beautifying the commandments is a glorification of God is that it's perceived to be an acknowledgement that the world itself is beautiful, that we need to just take a look, and that somehow by creating these the objects and beautifying the objects of our ritual performance, we're adding to the creation of God in the world itself, so that there's something very divine, very spiritual about the act of contributing, of creating, of acquiring, of utilizing, of making your life filled with a sense of the beauty of the holy, the beauty of the holy, and the holiness of the beauty, which is what Rabbi Lichtenstein always emphasized. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing. Many of you have access to this document. I just want you to know that many of the objects that we're going to see are actually pictured in photos that are not the highest of quality in the document itself. So you'll have a reference point. And I'm not going, I'm going to walk around now, so I'm not going to share it with you. And excuse me for taking a moment to get online on my phone so that I can walk around. Here I am, join with a video. 1 second. The meeting host has to let me in, please. Okay. Here I am, continue. Call in you.
Recording in progress.
Okay, can you hear me?
Turn off the microphone on the computer, I think.
I'm going to turn off my computer.
Microphone, at least.
Unmute. Can everybody hear me? You can. Okay. All right. Now, let me do what has to be done here. Flip the phone. Okay. All right, my friends. We're going to start on the tour. All right. So first, we're going to go into the living room. Actually, we're going to enter the house. Right? As you enter the house, one of the first things, 1 second, that you see is a David Moss creation. I'll refer to David Moss again. This, as you see, is a cut where the verse, Pitchu li sharei tzedek avovam odeya, open up for me the gates of righteousness. So we posted this in the entryway to our home. And now we're going to proceed. And as we enter the space here, I'll give you a little bit of a sense of the space itself. You'll have a view. We'll see many of these items. I'm going to try to pace myself because there's obviously a lot to see. But as you enter the room, there's a Bezalel carpet from 1930. It's called, this carpet is actually a special one. As you can see, the theme of the carpet are these menorot. Right there are candelabras all over, 7-branch menorahs all over. And the central term of the carpet is Eretz HaTzvi. It's hard to read, actually. You can see the word Tzion, and on the top of the carpet, you see Bezalel Yerushalayim. It's the land of the heart, the land of the deer. It's a carpet devoted to the land of Israel. And then we proceed. I'm going to start, as I promised, to tell you a little bit about how we became collectors. First, just to see the wall of Vishniak photographs, Roman Vishniak, the photographer of the vanished world in the 30s. He left his home in, I think he was already in Berlin, and to go on. No, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. He left Moscow to go to visit Jewish communities in Eastern Europe, to document the communities that he had a premonition that this was the last opportunity to capture the life that was. Many of you are familiar with his book, A Vanished World. Now that's part of the story that I want to tell you. Roman Vishniak came to Hillel at Ohio State, where I began, and at the time that I met Doreen, and we became very good friends. We would visit him. When we visited his home, and by the way, when he came to visit us in later years, he would bring us a photo each time he came. When we came to his home, he showed us some of the artifacts that he had collected. He himself was fascinating. I'm sorry, I'm not going to spend the time describing Vishniak, but some other time. But among the artifacts were amulets. I said, Jews had amulets? He would trade, as he was traveling through Eastern Europe, he would trade things with the people that he visited. And he collected these silver amulets. I didn't know that there was magic in Jewish life. I knew there was superstition, but I knew nothing about amulets. And by the way, I would say that despite the fact that my parents had some beautiful objects, some beautiful Hanukkah menorah, an Elijah cup. I mean, there were some beautiful objects. I would say that the nature of religious life that I experienced when I was young was black and white. And there was something missing. And then all of a sudden I discovered that there was some color to Jewish life, the idea of magic. It's something that's more unusual than the rigorous mode of the Jewish law that I had been exposed to as the primary expression of Judaism. And so that was an intriguing way to begin a quest. So Vishniak said to us that he needs some help. He didn't read or understand Hebrew well, and he wanted me to help translate something. And he said, instead of compensating us financially, we should go to this shop called Moriah, which was a Judaica shop at that time, I forget, on 47th Street, and then it moved to Madison. And we can find there some amulets. So that was my first encounter with Judaica. And indeed, we acquired some amulets. They're not in our house here. They're actually in our apartment in New York. Those amulets from Moriah. But I do want to share with you some other early amulets that we acquired over the years, just to understand what I'm talking about. Now, this is an 18th century amulet from Amsterdam. It's an amulet that would hang over the crib of a newborn boy to protect him from Lilith. You can see Lilith, Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve, Chutz Lilith, the demoness, outside, out Lilith. Here you see the serpent, Adam and Eve in the garden, and there are a whole range of verses that are used classically to ward off the evil. Mechashefa lo tichayeh, which is a verse that has to do with witches. So this is a classic crib amulet. The one hanging beside it, is a Moroccan amulet, maybe the early part of the 20th century. And it's encyclopedic. The woman's name who's carrying the child is Nuria Bat Chaviva. And you see depicted on the amulet, once again, Lilith with the abbreviation Lamed Kuf Yud Lishuatcha Kiviti Hashem. We await your salvation, O God. And above Lilith are these knives, daggers, right, to protect us from this danger. And then above the daggers are the three angels, Senoi, Sensenoi, Semengalef. Those of you familiar with the Midrash, it's a 9th century Babylonian text, very problematic, but nevertheless it had an enormous impact, because we see these characters. They're mentioned in the source when these angels who are depicted here, they look sort of like chickens. When they come and they're present, then Lilith cannot do her stuff. I mean, she kills her children. She endangers the lives of children. So this is the protection. And here you have a magic box with the prayer Ana Bechoach, the Yivarecha that you're familiar with, Shema Yisrael. I mean, in other words, the shir here down below here, the chapter from Psalm Shirla Ma'alot. It's all abbreviated as Sinai Harim, etc., etc. So you have a sense that the amuletic culture was very deeply ingrained in Europe. This is a European, in North Africa, in the Middle East. It was universal. Jews, like all other religions, practiced that type of magic. And I must say, I experienced it when I was young as well, at various times in our life. The next, let me see, I'm going to keep track of the time. All right, so next is this Shiviti. It's a story, and it's a factor, a very important factor in our collection. The first time that Doreen and I went to Eastern Europe in 1980, we went to Poland and Czechoslovakia because my father was born in Galicia, and Doreen's mother, who survived Auschwitz, was born in Prague. And 40 kilometers east of Prague, in the town of Kolin, Doreen's grandparents grew up, and we visited the town. No more Jews. There were no Jews remaining in the town. We met their teacher, who was not Jewish, named Jelinek, who most probably was of Jewish descent. He had the key to the synagogue. And as we were sitting with him, by the way, in the town square, an older person passed by, and he said, "This is Brooke's grandchildren." And it turns out something happened here that I alluded. Turns out that the person was familiar, knew Doreen's grandparents and knew where they lived, because they lived on the central square. So as we were visiting the synagogue, which, by the way, the roof had a big hole in it. There was water on the floor. All the prayer books were blackened, and it was in ruin. And on the sides of the synagogue,
At that time, 1980, they were storing communist banners. That's what it was good for. Of course, the people themselves were not interested at all in communism, but on the floor, folded, was a parchment. And I'll have to relate the whole story, as Doreen took Mr. Jelinek, who was a high school teacher, by the way, who every summer he and his students would renovate the Jewish cemetery in town. So Doreen took Jelinek to the other side of the synagogue, thinking that that would give me an opportunity, which it did, to further fold up the parchment and put it in my bag. There's a long story. I'll cut it short. It's a very important piece. It hung before the reader, the Chazan, in the synagogue. It's dated. If we can properly date it, the problem is the stain on the bottom. The stain on the bottom may be covering up a part of the verse, but if not, the date is 1792. It's a shiviti means before me. I place God before me at all times. It's a verse that sometimes appears over the ark in the synagogue, and it's a mystical shiviti, meaning there are many mystical allusions and references here, including the four dimensions of the divine name in all their different spellings, the magical menorah surrounded by Psalm 67 with 49 words, 7 times 7, God's name spelled in this fashion. You see this often, by the way, in Sephardic, in Eastern prayer books, where the four-letter tetragrammaton, Yud, He, Vav, He, is interspersed with Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud. It's a way of joining together in a union the divine powers, the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah, the divine presence. In addition, those of you familiar with the Rosh Hashanah prayer service, this is the Hineni prayer from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that the Chazan recites, the permission to lead the congregation. And very significantly is the meditation introduced by Isaac Luria before prayer every day. Hareini mekabel alai mitzvat aseh shel v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. I recommend this and propose this to you all, whether you pray, whatever, as a moment of intention. I hereby accept upon myself the commandment to love my neighbor as myself. That's how Luria began his prayer to God, because you can't face God until you're able to face your neighbor. So we brought this piece. We were able to take it with us. We had it cleaned. This is the state of the best we could do. In fact, I don't know if my friend Joseph was still on the call, but it was his cousin Nelly Savitsky who actually cleaned this piece for us in Jerusalem. And we decided that at some point we got, because now we heard just a couple of years ago, they actually renovated the synagogue. We thought the synagogue was going to be destroyed. But they've renovated all these synagogues in Bohemia. And we made a decision that we're going to donate this back to the synagogue in this condition in memory of Doreen's grandparents, so that it could hang once again in the town as a memorial. Continuing on the theme, and by the way, I'll stop to take some questions when I finish with, let's say, with this room. We have 3 rooms to go through. On the same theme of remembering, this is a Torah mantle, 1757 from Prague. So one of the reasons that we acquired this mantle is because of Doreen's connection, her family's connection to Prague, and the fact that Prague was a center in the early modern period of the silk trade. And you see their beautiful Torah curtains and Torah mantles, really magnificent. And some of you have been to the museum in Prague where the Nazis gathered all the Judaica from Central Europe. But what's exhibited is in the museum itself is just exceptional, as is, of course, the cemetery. An item here. This is a Moroccan tefillin bag. What's significant here? What I wanted to show you was the fact that Moshe HaKohen, following his name, are the Hebrew letters Samach Tet, Some of you may know, may be familiar with this. Samach Tet represents Sephardi Tahor, a pure Sephardic Jew, meaning of pure descent. I guess the bag could be used both for tallit and for tefillin, and it's, I think, quite a beautiful bag itself. A number of other items here that I want to share with you. First, we have some birth items. The collection, I apologize, I mean, it's not a museum, so it's not organized by theme. It's the location has to do with where there's room and where it may be appropriate, and etc. But there is a sort of a common theme between a couple of items in the room birth. This is an Elijah chair from Alsace. There's an exact, it's not a duplicate. This is the duplicate, their duplicate in the museum in Strasbourg. So we know that it's sort of late 19th century. And as you can see on the right is the inscription, Zeh HaKisei Shel Eliyahu. And on the left, Zot Briti Asher Tishmoru. This is my covenant that you shall guard. The pillows, the pillowcases are modern, of course. But the chair itself is a traditional chair for Elijah, who visits every newborn child, and the sandak, what we would call the godfather, the godparent. Elijah is a visitor, and in a way, he's condemned to these visits because he was critical of Israel. And the character of Elijah in the Bible is that of an angry prophet, and he's transformed as the messenger, not only of redemption, but the messenger who reconciles the generations. So he's present at each newborn to attest to the fact that the people of Israel that he was so critical of are committed and are devoted and are loyal to their tradition. Now, along with that, and I have to tell you that we just were able to hang this today. We have a wimple. The wimple is also from Alsace, and I can't go through obviously all the symbolism here, but a wimple is made up of the swaddling cloth with which the young child was brought to the circumcision. The cloth is then cut and pieced together, and this is a custom it's an Alsatian custom, which spread to some other communities as well. We have a wimple actually that we made for Shaul. If we have time, I'll share that with you as well. But this is is striking. The colors, it seems to me, are the colors of France. There's a point to this in a moment. On the bottom of the wimple for the entire length, and it's a pretty long. So, by the way, you see the name of the child. What is it? Didesheim, obviously an Alsatian name, born in the year of 1869. So that's the date of this wimple. And across the bottom of the wimple are all the zodiac signs. So the zodiac signs, and above, flowers and birds and fruit. And actually, I was thinking whether maybe the month of Shvat, but I don't know because of Tu B'Shvat. I just don't know. But you have various representations of fruit above, etc. Of course, the greeting for the newborn child is that he be raised to Torah, to learning, l'chuppah, to family life, to loving family life, ulama'asim tovim, and to good deeds, to become a moral personality. Now, what is interesting, 1869, 1870 is the Franco-Prussian War. Here you have a French soldier with a flag, and then here you have the family actually meeting. It looks like, are they meeting for Passover Seder, or are they meeting to discuss the political events? Are they meeting to celebrate the bris? Here you have some instruments. I don't know the history of this piece. There's some work that needs to be done but it's a fascinating representation, and it gives you an idea of literally the lengths that people went to using their creative talent to commemorate and memorialize the different events in Jewish life. And this is a folk piece. It's a great folk piece. Now, a more formal piece that we have here, also a recent acquisition, which is absolutely magnificent, is this Torah Crown. Some words about this crown. The crown was created by Ludwig Volpert, a master craftsperson. He pioneered the workshop at the Jewish Museum in New York. He was trained in Bauhaus. He then made Aliyah. He worked at Bezalel. And what he did here with this crown, there are a number of them that exist with some variation. Surrounding the crown on this level are the symbols of the 12 tribes. So here you see, for instance, a Ze'ev, Binyamin Ze'ev, a wolf, right? Ze'ev Yitraf. Here you see a bull. Here's the bull, right? So that's Joseph. Joseph is the bull. I'm puzzled here by the fish, I must say, but if someone has a precise answer, I mean, I have some ideas about the fish. It could be Reuben, because Reuben is compared to turbulent waters. It could be Ephraim and Menashe, but then there would be sort of a doubling of Joseph. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. Around the edge is inscribed Vizota Torah on the bottom. Vizota Torah. This is the Torah that has been bequeathed to Israel. And above on the crown, it actually literally says Keter Torah, crown of the Torah. I want to say a word about Wolpert. Wolpert was not only a master craftsperson and responsible for a lot of the creative work that emanated in his day and afterwards at the Jewish Museum, but there was something what really sort of typified his work was his crafting of the Hebrew letter. There was a professor at UCLA for many years named, request to move the camera a little, I guess, okay. Is this better? Stephen Kaiser. Stephen Kaiser was the founding director of the Jewish Museum in New York. And when he came to UCLA, he taught an integrated arts class. And I invited him to speak at Hillel a number of times. And one of the things that he taught me was that the only Jewish contributions to art, he said there were only 2 Jewish contributions to art. Well, actually, one to art and one to architecture. The contribution to architecture was the Bima Ba'imtza, the Bima in the middle of the synagogue. We've lost that tradition. The Bima in the middle of the synagogue was clearly identified as the center point, because the center of prayer is the community, not the leaders. The Protestant version of synagogue is to have the leaders up front lead a congregation. The prayer leader significantly was to be from the middle, because it's the community that creates the opportunity for prayer and devotion, and endows the leader with as a representative, but no more than that. They're the actors. So the Bima in the middle as a contribution to architecture, and the contribution to art is the Hebrew letter, the art of the Hebrew letter. So I'm sorry, I'm going to bring it a little closer. You have to see how Wolpert, how careful was his letter. We'll see some other examples of it a little bit later on. This on its beside the Wolpert piece is a Moroccan Hanukkah menorah and oil menorah in typical North African style. I would say beginning of the 20th century. And I wanted you to have a sense, because I don't, of the role that David Moss played in our lives, both for Doreen and myself, and for Hillel, because the art in the Hillel building was designed by David Moss together with the students that he met with. I wanted you to see some of the classic examples of the ketubot that he made. We met David Moss in 1975 or before we were married. He did design our ketubah, and these are some of the classical ketubot. You see that it's a paper cut. It's cut. This is micrography, meaning it's writing of verses around the edges of the ketubah. In the middle, there's a verse of prayer, Anim Zmirot. Clearly, it has to do with the couple itself. Every ketubah was personally designed. In between the floral groups, also you have various verses. I'll show you another example. There are 3 volumes of these ketubot, love letters, he calls them. One is traditional, one is transitional, and one is modern. So I'm showing you some from what he calls the traditional volume. I think this one is just magnificent. You know, and you really have a sense of that it's alive. This ketubah is alive, and I think it's clearly related to some people with a Sephardic background. He has a poem here, a little poem from a Ladino romancero here, accompanying the ketubah itself. One further item in the room is a Torah ark. There's a little Hasidic Torah here. The story of the Torah is some years ago. I was sitting with a student. The Torah itself was up for auction, and I had a call from the auction house, and I said to the student, "Hold on a minute," and I asked him for permission, and I proceeded to bid. And then on the other side, I heard after a couple of bids, "It's yours." And I'm sitting there, and there were tears in my eyes. The idea, I mean, it's sort of really that we would be able to house a Torah in our home. And what we've done, there's a wonderful teaching by Isaiah Horowitz, who was, before he went to live in Tzfat in Jerusalem, he was a great rabbinic leader and mystic. He was the rabbi of Prague. And Prague in the 16th century, when he was there, was a flourishing town. There were many wealthy Jews who had built large homes. He told the people, instead of building these mansions, build adequate homes. And if you have room, set aside a space, a spiritual space in your home. So that's something that I've tried to do. That this is where I daven in the morning, and have a little corner. That's a spiritual space. Everybody needs what he said. He actually recommends a meditation room. So I think you should think about that, because the idea again of beautifying your home, of surrounding yourself with with objects of Jewish meaning, is a way of introducing some spiritual significance to the structure itself. You know, at Hillel, I say that the stones at Hillel have a soul, and that's the point. That it's not merely bricks and mortar. There's something beyond that. If anybody has a question, if there are any questions, I'll take a question now. I think that we're gonna leave this room. We may come back. This is a manuscript facsimile. You know, I'm going to take it into the other room. If we have time, we'll take a look at it. Okay, so now here we are, and in this room, what I'd like to focus on is first of all some of the fiber objects, the material. This is the Italian tallit that I referred to. It's dated to early 18th century. It may have come from, because there's some evidence for that, from the Montefiore family. Now, what's striking about the tallit is the work. I'm sorry, I have to really get close here. I want you to see the embroidery, up and down, across, on the top, on the bottom. I've been fascinated by the dedication of the people who created these prayer shawls. You see them only in museums. You see them, there's some attempt to revive this art form among Italians today. But what a wonderful idea to surround yourself with a tallit that symbolizes light, and with nature itself, the floral dimension of the embroidery in which you wrap yourself, so that the spiritual and the natural are brought together in that moment. Along with the tallit, there's an early 20th century Yemenite wedding headdress with some of the jewelry that might accompany the Yemenite woman. In the other room, you might have seen a belt hanging over one of the cases. The belt goes along with all the necklace and the all the other jewelry that would be worn because the bride would be bedecked. Along with that, this is a groom's wedding coat from Georgia and from Tbilisi, and we know that it comes from the Pinchasot family. Also, I assume 20th century, I don't have a precise date, but you see to what lengths the community went to elaborate and to celebrate their life cycle events. So here you have the tallit, the Italian tallit, the Yemenite headdress, and the Georgian wedding garment. Along with that, I thought that perhaps this would be a good opportunity to focus on some of the ketubot in the room. We'll come back to the books. You see here, this is a bookcase with many of the sort of older volumes. We'll come back to see this in a moment. Among the ketubot in the room itself, and then in the next room we'll see some more, is a ketubah from Bologna, 1840, and you see here the verse above, Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov. If you found a woman, you found goodness. I mean, obviously, it's written from the male perspective, of verses that are decorating the edges of the ketubah. Urei banim levanecha. You should see children, to your children, grandchildren, love the pomegranates, fruitful fertility. The entire design gives you a sense of exquisite joy and beauty in the celebration. This is a birth amulet, Italian birth amulet that would hang over the crib to protect the baby. Each community had its own form of protection. In this corner, we have an Indian ketubah from the 1870s, and what you find here, it's the early 20th century from Calcutta. So you see fertility symbols, growth. I mean, that's how innate growth and nature, as the couple is launched into marriage, fruitful grapes, and the symbol and the Jewish symbol, a Jewish home, fertility, blessings of plenty. And of course, what's emphasized on the ketubah itself are the amounts of the dowry, because although we usually have a standard amount, it seems to me that in India, they preserved a sort of Eastern culture with the precise amount that actually was intended as a settlement for the woman in case of divorce or death. Moving on. Any questions?
Chaim, it looked like the Indian ketubah was signed in English.
Yes, it was signed in English. That's exactly right. So I mean, you see things as you look through sort of ritual objects. So you see that the community was sometimes not so different from our own, meaning that in the early 20th century in Calcutta, not everybody was able to write in Hebrew. And attestation can be done in any language. It's completely valid, and we attempt to to encourage people to sign in Hebrew. But it's sort of striking. I think that's absolutely correct. All right, this is our dining room, and I want to continue my story of ketubot, and then also focus a little bit on silver objects. It may be that we may have some time for a little bit of a few Haggadot. Here too, by the way, just as I don't want to forget, this is another wimple. This is a 1926 wimple, and it's from what's really wonderful about it. It's from the month of Tishrei, the first month of the year. You can see the child was born, and you have a lulav and an etrog here underneath Tishrei, and you have a shofar, and the beautiful fruit that's part of the celebration. It's approaching. It's before Yom Kippur, but it's approaching Sukkot and the celebration of harvest. All right. So in this room we have the following ketubot that I think are fascinating. So this is an Italian ketubah from Ancona. It's dated 1819, and the woman's name is Victoria. And so Victoria is represented by victory. And as you can see, victory is not clothed. So not only were ketubot signed in English, but the rabbis were not worried about clothing sometimes, at least in the art form itself, and the beautiful art surrounding here, the fruit, the floral beauty of the ketubah, with a cartouche above b'stimana tava u'v'mazla ma'alya l'chatna u'lekalta u'lechol Yisrael amen ken yehi ratzon. All right, so this is for a good time, for mazel tov, for the bride and the groom. And on the bottom of the ketubah, you would have some t'nayim, some private conditions that was signed, an agreement of the bride and the groom. Here we have another ketubah, this one from Safi, near Essaouira in Morocco. It was written by David El-Kayam, a very famous rabbi and scribe. In fact, I have behind the ketubah an article by Shalom Sabar. Some of you may know Shalom, whose brother taught at UCLA for many years. Yonah and Shalom has PhD in UCLA, which he wrote and researched the ketubah collection at the Skirball. And he's basically the expert internationally on ketubot. He became the head of the art department at the Hebrew University for Art and Folklore. And what's striking about El-Kayam's ketubah, this one in particular, you see some of the design, a crown above, is that there's a clause that's added right here at this point in the ketubah, where the groom, the husband to be, agrees that if the family has to move, or if he wants to move because of need or business or whatever, that his wife would have to agree if there's any move to be made. So there's an attempt here, you see, to sort of there's a progressive dimension, perhaps, to this ketubah, which is consistent with the whole idea of ketubah, which was instituted a couple thousand years ago, actually as a protection for women, in spite of the fact that today we feel that it's not egalitarian, but it does. But there is some, I think, wonderful expression in the tradition. And although it's very difficult to read on the bottom, we know that the groom was so infatuated and so taken by his wife that he added an additional sum to the ketubah as his promise to his wife because of his love for her. So there, excuse me, I don't know why the screen went blank, but and here on the bottom you see kol sason, the kol simcha, kol chatan, the kol kala, the classical, the blessing, the seventh blessing, the verse from Jeremiah, the sound of gladness and joy, the sound of the bride and the groom. Okay, this, by the way, is a tallit bag from Zaire. We learned how did the tallit bag get to Zaire? Jews from the island of Rhodes traveled or resettled in Zaire, we saw exact replicas of this pattern or similar pattern in the museum in Athens. So this is a Greek pattern of Greek Jews from the island of Rhodes who settled in Zaire. Here is another ketubah from Bayonne, France. This is the earliest ketubah in our collection, 1751. So you see here the floral motif surrounding the ketubah. It seems to be sort of classical, of beautifying the ketubah with a sense of growth, nature, growth, family, and above a remnant of of a seal. You can see actually, I think, the seal here with a ribbon that emerges from the seal itself. So the document was as if it's an official document with a seal and the ribbon in the same pattern, in the same floral pattern. Also, I mean, the ketubot in this room, all of them so far are parchment, right? They're all on parchment. There are some ketubot in the house that are on paper. I'll show them. We'll get to them later. And here, the final ketubah in the room is another Italian ketubah from Ancona. This one is in 1849. From 1849. What we loved about this is sort of the shape of the ketubah. It's a very, it's a very beautiful shape itself, very elegant, and the ring, of course, which represents the colors of Italy. So that's the point that I guess I wanted to make about Jewish art. And that was sort of Kaiser's point about the only Jewish contribution to art being the Hebrew letter. Jews adapted what they saw in the cultures that they lived with. And a lot of the art and a lot of the cultural patterns found their way into Judaic artistic expression. And so that's something else that's attractive. Art as a means of unification, of cultural unification. It transcends boundaries. It's something that all people understand. And in particular, by the way, the idea of illuminating a marriage contract, it's striking. I once had a wedding with a Moroccan chazan, and when we came to the point of reading the ketubah, he sang the ketubah. That transformed me. I understood something that I had never understood before. That is, and I asked myself, I said, tell me, how many lawyers do you know who go with a contract to court and start singing the contract? This ketubah, this dry legal document, is a celebration. It's something holy. It celebrates Kiddushin. And it's beautified because it is something that unifies the bride and the groom. Not merely does it technically, is it technically contractual, goes beyond the technical. Again, here on the bottom, you have some additional clauses that are a short text of some conditions in the marriage. All right. Now, I guess the next, there's something else that's important that I want to share with you. This, by the way, this is a Shabbos lamp. We have two of them in each corner. Jewish homes in Central Europe. This is Dutch. The other one is Italian, actually. Would light these lamps in oil lamps with a drip container here on the bottom to gather the oil. And it took on various forms. But right here in the corner of Lichtbenchen, of lighting Shabbos candles. So this is my mother, Aleha Shalom, mother's candelabrum. These, by the way, are candlesticks that were designed by Posen, the Posen Judaica shop in Frankfurt. Really important shop in the late 19th century. And this is a piece by David Moss that we light every Friday before candlelight. It's in Yiddish. it shows you a 7-branched menorah with 2 candles, the 2 Shabbos candles. And there's a point to the 7-branched menorah. The prayer here in Yiddish is a techina. It's a woman's petition, a classic woman's petition. And as you can see, by the way, it's it's dark all week and lit for right before Shabbos. It was written by Sarah Bastuvim. She composed a whole book of prayers. And in this particular prayer, she compares the woman lighting candles to the high priest, and therefore the 7-branched menorah. And Moss wrote it in sort of this classic type of Germanic Hebrew script that's difficult to read, but it is Yiddish. All right, so and I think really poignant. Right here in the corner, I also hung. I found this some years ago. Rabot Banot Asu Chayil. It's from from Eshet Chayil, from the Woman of Valor. Many women have done grandly Va'adalit al Kolana, and you've bested them all. And it's signed B'ha'arachal Logvul, with appreciation without boundaries. Ba'alech, your husband. So that was quite moving. All right, on the same wall here, by the way, and this is a good lead into the discussion, is a paper cut, of which there are numerous ones in the house. This one in particular was designed by and crafted by Oded Davidson. So this is, I said I would tell you the story about how we became collectors. So the encounter with Roman Vishniak was one point in our lives that, and finding the Shiviti in Kolin. These are points in our life where we began to realize that there was something that we were acquiring that was significant and important. And we were not determined. We were natural in our collection. It happened. And we went to Israel also. Goes back to 1980. You see the date of the date is 1980. And we saw an exhibit in Migdal David and Tower of David of paper cuts. There were 3 artists. We looked their names up in the phone book, and we visited 2 of them. One in Haifa became our friend, and you did Shadur. When we went to Shadur, and we obviously interested, her work is beautiful, magnificent. There's a verse from Isaiah that she's illustrated here in this particular fashion. It's sort of idyllic. It's an idyllic representation. We couldn't afford it in those days. And that's what happened. We visited the artist, and we asked her, would it be possible for us to pay it out over some months? And that's what allowed us to actually acquire some of the earliest items that became important and sort of motivated us to continue further. So a key was getting to know the artist, establishing a connection and a sense of trust and appreciation. Same story, a similar story here, because I said I would talk a little bit about the contemporary silver. We don't have many old silver antiques. Number one, the silver antique market is filled with a lot of forgeries, and I mean, I'm just not that good to be able to identify them. And beside that, they're much too expensive if they're real. And these are beautiful items. This is another Walpert piece. It's a kosher Eliyahu Hanavi. It's a cup of Elijah. But when we first saw it, it was actually, I think it was being sold by his daughter, Chava. And we thought that perhaps we would be able to use it for the baby naming, for our daughter Shuli's baby naming. Shuli was born in 1983, but once again, this was impossible given the price of the cup, except that we worked out a relationship, and over months we were able to acquire it. We had it for the baby naming itself. So this is a Walpert kosher Eliyahu Elijah cup. This is a Walpert challah board. I think you can see the design of his lettering You see it, by the way, on the cup as well, in the Bore Pri Hagafen blessing around the base here, and you see it on this challah board. There's actually the wooden board that comes out where you cut the challah. Mazon Mitzeda, his Biel and Avshenu. It's from one of the Shabbos songs that we say, table songs. That food is prepared to satisfy our soul on Shabbat. And here you have another Walpert piece. This is a yurtzeit lamp holder, a Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, with a verse from Proverbs. The candle of God is the soul of is a soul of a human being. And here you have a collection of a variety of these are basically the Israeli silver, except for the candlesticks were made by a contemporary Italian, Vignelli, Leila Vignelli, someone who's not Jewish. That's the other part about art. I said art speaks a universal language. And when we talk about something elegant, we've never seen Shabbos candlesticks that flow in the way in which Vignellis do. And we use them on Rosh Hashanah and Pesach. We use them a couple times a year on special occasions. This is a Shabbos Kiddush cup by an artisan named Yaakov Davidoff, with whom we developed a very close relationship. In fact, during the second Intifada, if I'm not mistaken, we had a sale here in the house with some Israeli artists. He was one of them. This is a honey spoon. I mean, sort of the creativity is magnificent with the bee. You see the bee right there, and the honey-colored gem. This was my father's Kiddush cup. It's a Bezalel Kiddush cup. It's from 1940. My mother gave it to my father when they were married. Yerushalayim, Hakotel Hamaravi, and this is important. This item, although it's not Israeli, it was designed. It's a Bucciolati design, but there was in New York City. He's no longer alive, unfortunately. Was a really a lover of Judaica named Michael Strauss, who made copies that he had arranged for in a legal manner of museum pieces and of some contemporary pieces. This is an etrog case, a case for an etrog for Sukkot, which is just again. The design is so unusual and so magnificent. This is an early Israeli Bezalel artist by the name of Abishai, a Yemenite, whose work I love because of its etching. And on the plate itself, you have a representation of the fruits of the land of Israel. And this is a Kiddush set for holidays, for Yamim Tovim. Then I cannot fail to share with you this work by Sari Srulovich, who's absolutely a magnificent young artisan. You'll find Sari in Chutzot HaYotzer, in the Artist Walk, below the Jaffa Gate, on the way up, and also behind the King David Hotel. There's a street of artisans. David Moss has a studio there, as does Sari. This is a plate, a honey dish. The honey goes in the center, and the apples fit in these receptacles around the edge here. That's one of her objects. We have a number of them, and here is her matzah plate. It's fantastic if you can imagine that this is a piece of matzah, right? And so we and it's where the matzah rests during our Passover Seder. I wanted you also to see the work of another Chutzot HaYotzer artisan named Oshrit. This is one of her challah covers. I mean, these are something that are more modest that I think that you might be interested in. This is a challah cover for the new moon, Rosh Chodesh, with the blessing of the new moon and the special meditation that we recite in the synagogue when we bless the new moon. And she has them for all the holidays, for Shabbat, for sure. We have a whole series of them. And there's one more Israeli artist that's very dear to us, and his name is Oded Davidson. His work is whimsical, creative, and it surrounds us. So this is Oded's tzedakah box. You can see that it's on the theme of Jonah and the whale. The money goes into the fish. The bottom of the box, if you can see, here's the whale that locks up the box. And around the edges of the box is the story of Nineveh and Jonah on four sides. He has etched in the entire, the narrative, along with a drowning Jonah and the boat and our call on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Teshuvah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, return, prayer and petition, and righteousness and tzedakah they are redemptive. This is one of his pieces. I want the other pieces that we have, among others. I mean, there are others that we have as well. These are tefillin cases that Doreen bought me, I think, with our 40th anniversary, and it includes. I don't know if you can see this. Excuse me, 1 second. Yeah, it includes a dedication to our family on the bottom of the head case, with on the four edges are etched in the four animals that are mentioned that we should prepare to enter the day as brave as a lion and as quick as a deer, etc., etc. And this is the cover for the hand tefillin, and also with the recitation, the prophetic recitation that I bind you to me forever. I bind you to me with righteousness and justice and in loving kindness and compassion. I bind you unto me in faithfulness, and then you will know God. Those are the tefillin boxes, and this is a little bit of a Havdalah set here that you see. This is the candle holder, Borei Mirei Ha'esh. You have 3 stars, and the people looking out to the 3 stars. And this is a spice box. I think this is extremely successful because the Havdalah ceremony is theatrical. So we have a little theater. Backstage is where you place the spices. The door is open. Backstage is open, I see. And here you have the characters who are carrying the signs for Shavuot Tov. Okay. I'll take any questions now, and now we're gonna get to see some of the books. Any questions?
I had one question.
Yes.
I
want to do something about Passover. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead, please. Yes.
I read about periods of time in Jewish history where art was discouraged and showing art was discouraged. Can you speak to that and kind of the balance of that in Jewish history?
All right. So I don't know whether there were periods of Jewish history. I think there may have been legal decisors who looked askance at art. But you know what? See, that was what I had to unlearn. The prejudice that the second commandment meant that there was no representational art, or maybe no art at all. All you have to do, and I suggest for everyone to do this, is look up in your on your computer and Google Dura Europos, D-U-R-A E-U-R-O-P-O-S. Dura Europos was a city in northern Syria, near the boundary, where there was a synagogue, which we're in the 3rd century. There was what we might suggest the closest thing to a pluralistic community, the synagogue near the church, and on the same complex, and or in their vicinity, and the earth. It's a very dry location, desert-like, where the earth caved in, and it preserved an entire wall. The front wall of the synagogue is painted with frescoes, and the frescoes in the 3rd century depict the cycle, the biblical cycle, including midrashic interpretation. Now you know now Dura Europus. Now what about all the synagogue mosaics from the Galilee, from the 4th to the 7th century? What do you make of that, which include the Zodiac, which include Mercury, and being depicted along with the Zodiac, right? And the sun chariot in the center of one of the zodiacs. So it seems to me that throughout Jewish history, Jewish life was accompanied by art, and the synagogue included art. I think it's a mistake. What happened is that I think at some point the rabbis saw art being utilized as part of a polemic against Judaism, or representational art as being theologically very Christian. So Jewish art, I would say, retreated from the grand graphic form to illuminating manuscripts. And if we're not going to have the time now to look through the Haggadot, but the medieval Haggadot, especially the Spanish Haggadot, are filled with paintings and drawings. And that's where a lot of the artistic energy was directed. Now, speaking about Passover, I hope that helps to answer your question. It doesn't mean that there wasn't opposition, but it seems to me the people, this is a case where the artists and the people won out over the opposition, right? Because you see it here. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Passover and then a few minutes about the books. So this is our Passover Seder plate. It's designed by Boaz Yemini, a 3-generation Yemenite family of artisans who came in the early part of the 20th century to Palestine, and the earlier generations were in the workshop, the silver workshop in Bezalel, and this is Boaz's creation. You see the names of the various elements of that are used on the Seder plate in Rashi script, which is so unusual. And the magnificent design is floral. It's a floral design of this Seder plate. Alongside the Seder plate, there's a Flemish 19th century or late 18th century a Passover plate here with a kid, the man, I guess the wandering Jew with a kid with a Chad Gadya, and this is an Alsatian plate. This is a classic Alsatian plate, also from the 19th century, maybe a little earlier. And this is an Italian matzah trendle. This is used to poke the holes in the matzah. And this is another Italian amulet. It's another birth amulet that would hang above the crib. Some other Passover pieces hanging here in the room. This is a Passover. It's called a Passover towel. I have no. I would venture an opinion that this was not used to dry anyone's hands. That it's a decorative piece on which is written, "Whoever is hungry, come and eat. Whoever needs, come and participate in our Passover." Above Pesach Matzah Maror, and this is basically how we think it would hang in a Jewish home in Central Europe, most probably. A beautiful piece of cloth to beautify the Passover. Here we have a wall of different plates. This is a classic plate from that's a design from the exhibit, the Czech exhibit, A Precious Legacy, from the museum in Prague. And this is Chava Wolpert, Ludwig Wolpert's daughter's Passover Seder plate, which we have also used in our home over the years. Above the doorway is another Passover towel, here with depicting the 4 children. The 4 phrases of redemption are mentioned here, and the verse, the commandment to eat matzah for 7 days. I would say early 20th century. I don't know exactly, also obviously European. And finally, in this room, another Passover piece I don't know whether this is something that is easily identifiable. It's a typical David Moss puzzle. And what's striking about it is the following. If you look from this angle and you read Hebrew, you'll see that at the top, meaning all the way to the right, it says Chacham, then it says Rasha, then it says Tam, and then Shin Yud Lamed, She'eino Yodea L'Sh'ol. And if you look at it this way, right, it looks like some cultural depiction of Chinese letters with Chinese design, including over on the left, the pagoda. So this is the cross-cultural unity and the sense of universality of the ritual and of the celebration itself. We have about 10 minutes, and I'm going to take you to a little corner here to share with you some of the books. There are many stories. Unfortunately, I can't share them all with you. I'll show you some significant items. This is the oldest book that I have. It's from 1505. It was printed in Fano in Italy. It's a legal text and an Ashkenazic legal text called the Rokeach. The Rokeach is Rokeach means the pharmacist, and that name has been preserved for Elazar HaRokeach. It's been preserved throughout Jewish history as a family name. What's really significant here is this volume. This is this is an example of the Bamberg Talmud. And here I want to tell a story. I don't know that I'm going to be able to show you much more. The Bamberg Talmud was printed in 1520 in Venice. Daniel Bamberg was a Christian from Antwerp who came to Venice to print beautiful Hebrew books. This one's a little dirty on top, but not here. And he and his printer, one of his printers was Elijah Levitas, among others. Levitas was very important rabbi because he had to work with Bamberg. Remember this, the printers in Italy were artists in the 16th century, and they had to have a license to print. Almost 90% of the printers were Christians, and they were printing from manuscripts. So they needed scholars to work with them. Bamberg, first of all, designed this magnificent letter. The type of the print here, remember he was banging this out, the metal, banging out these letters. These letters were thought to be so exemplary that when he closed his press, they were sold and they were used for a number of centuries in Amsterdam. So that books printed in Amsterdam in the 1700s would say, with Bamberg's letters. That's Kaiser's point. The art of the Hebrew letter is a center of design. Now, what Bamberg did with his printer, they designed the standard page of Talmud. Until Bamberg, the Talmud was not standardized. After Bamberg, if you want to study tractate brachot, blessings, page, you would know brachot 3a. And in every Talmud printed for 500 years up till now, it's almost right. It's 500 years already, right? 1520, right? It's actually more than that. 2120, right? I'm sorry. What is it now? It's 20. It's 2020. All right. So we're getting there, right? We're 500 years, right? So after Bamberg, one could identify the page of Talmud with ease because of the standardization. All right, this is one of the great contributions to Jewish learning. Let me see what so let me show you one other thing here. I wanted to tell you a little bit about censorship, but I'm sorry. All right, let me say a word about censorship. This is an example. This is the Bravanels. The binding here is magnificent. I had a special binder who unfortunately passed away, a binder in Jerusalem. This is a Bravanel. So you know that Don Isaac Bravanel was Ferdinand and Isabella's finance minister. He was one of the last Jews was the last Jew to appeal to reverse the decree of expulsion. He and his family went first to Portugal, then they went to Italy, and in Naples, and then in Venice, where he admired the form of leadership. He was an anti-monarchist, became an extreme anti-monarchist. So I wanted to show you here what censorship means. Censorship means the following: that in 1550, there was a case brought to the Vatican about the Talmud because of a suit that was filed by two printers in Venice. And the case that was brought was that the Talmud was filled with derogatory and insulting comments about Christianity. And so the Pope decreed that the Talmud and Jewish books should be burned in 1553. There was a major burning of Jewish books in the what's it called, the Piazza del Fiore, so whatever. I think I'm mistaken, forgetting the name, where Bruno himself was killed, right? So now there's a plaque in the center of the square where the books were burned. So thousands of Hebrew books were destroyed. We were able to thank God that some were preserved, and it was only because of the appeal, mostly of these Christian Hebraists, these Christian printers who, in the post-Renaissance, who understood that Christianity rests on a foundation of Judaism, and themselves were interested in the origins and Hebrew teachings. They insisted that they be able to continue to print. It was also their livelihood. And the result was a policy of censorship. Hebrew books could be printed, but they would be censored. Censored meant the following: that, and it created a whole an employment, what do you call it? A road of employment for Jews, mostly for apostates, for converted Jews who wanted to earn some money, who became censors because they read Hebrew. So they would travel from house to house. And they would then, and to give you the privilege of owning Jewish books, they would look through your books, and they had a list of words and themes that they were to censor, and they would cross them out, sometimes with a pen with some chemicals that actually destroy the page, and most often with black ink that over time fades. I mean, we have the originals, because only in Christian Europe were these books censored. In Constantinople, there was no censorship, and we have the books. So we have the originals, and we have manuscripts with the origin. And here, for example, is the signature of the censor. We actually know the biographies of many of these censors. Let's see what time it is. Okay, I have about 5 minutes. So I want to tell you a story about the Bamberg Talmud, and then I want to show you the Mos Haggadah. And I'm sorry that that's going to be our tour for the day. The story with the Bamberg Talmud is that the Val Madonna Library in London, that itself was collected by a man named Jack Lunzer, had a whole set of the Bamberg Talmud, very early set, that Lunzer himself found in an exhibit that was put together by Westminster Abbey. He discovered that the Westminster Abbey had a set of the Talmud. There was a story behind it. There was a rumor that it was ordered by Henry VIII because he heard that the Talmud gives you license for divorce. That's not true. The Talmud was owned by a professor at Oxford, then donated to the monarch, to the Crown. The Crown owned the Talmud. Westminster Abbey actually owned the Talmud. And Lunzer, when he saw it, when he understood that they had a full set, started to call and over years, 10, 15 years, was nudging the director of Westminster Abbey to sell, and he refused to sell until finally one day, Lunzer, who was a diamond merchant, was stuck in Africa for Shabbat. He used to come home every Shabbat. He traveled on Sunday, and in that day's paper, he read that Sotheby's was trying to sell the charter, the deed to Westminster Abbey to an American. Sotheby's was the vehicle for the sale of the charter to an American, and the British government was refusing to allow the deed out of the country. So Lunzer stepped in as a third party. He bought the deed to Westminster Abbey, and then the next day there was a phone call. The director of Westminster Abbey said, "We've been waiting for your call," and they worked out a trade. So the Talmud was transferred to Lunzer, and then it was put up for sale. And our son was given the task of checking the condition and writing a condition report. So the curator at Sotheby's gave Shaul 3 days. As I like to say, they locked him in a room, and he went through all the 11 volumes of the Talmud, and then participated, was present at the sale, where that Talmud edition was sold for $9.3 million. Let me now close out our tour with the Mos Haggadah. A treat. I can only show you one page, or 1 or 2 pages, and it's a part of my wishing you a wonderful Passover celebration. At the center of the Haggadah, I don't know, did we lose our, here we are. We come across a passage: in every generation, one has to see oneself as if one left Egypt. So Mos has made this page with mylar mirrors, so that as you look on the page and you see the images, there are men on one side, women on the other side, each reflected in each other's mirror, each dressed in period costume, so that as you look at the page, you actually see yourself in every generation. And every generation is participating in the redemption from Egypt. All right. I'll show you the title page, which some of you are familiar with. I mean, this is a work of genius, and there's something to show almost on every page. This is the title page. It has a tree of life, 10 branches, the 10 emanations in the Kabbalah, a 7-branch tree on 7 branches on a 3-pronged base, like the temple menorah. So the menorah is the tree of life, right? And surrounding the tree of life in micrography is the entire text of the earliest Haggadah that we have. So it's shorter than the one we have, but it's the entire text written out on the title page. Now, this is why I want to show you this, because it's a profound idea that in the beginning, in the thought, in the grain of creativity, already is contained the outcome, the product itself. And so the tree at the beginning of this Haggadah is sort of bearing the fruit that then emerges as in the discussion itself. So I want you, I wish you a creative and meaningful and beautiful Seder. Hopefully some of you will be able to gather now with, if you're vaccinated, with members of your family, and that Passover will actually have a redemptive quality to bring good life and health to all of you. Thank you. Chag Sameach. Be well. And if you have any further questions, you can always email me. Lehitraot. Take care. Thank you, David.
Rabbi Chaim, and thank you so much.
Thank you.